Over the next 3 episodes of Mo in Conversation, I'll be joined by filmmaker Nicky Gogan. Nicky is a graduate of the National College of Art and Design and the European Audiovisual Entrepreneurs. Nicky has spearheaded numerous cultural events and organisations over the years, including Sync Digital Media, Darklight Film Festival, Data, Wildlight Channel, exhibit series at the Digital Hub, offline animation residency, and still films, where Nicky has been writing, producing, editing and directing animations, artist films, dramas and documentaries over the past 15 years. Nicky's work at Still Films continues its roots in documentary, where she most recently produced Vivian Dick's film New York, Our Time. Her work has won numerous prestigious awards, and she is a creative force to be reckoned with a unique perspective. Last Hijack won an Emmy Award for Best Online Production in Non-Fiction category in 2015. Nicky was nominated for Multimedia Person of the Year by the Digital Media Awards in 2003 and 2004. Still Films won the Dublin Critics Circle Michael Dwyer Discovery Award for New Talent in 2011 at the Dublin International Film Festival for Build Something Modern, which was also voted one of the top 5 Irish films of 2011 by the Irish Times. Seaview received a special jury's mention at the DMZ Docs in Korea, and Pyjama Girls won the Audience Award at the Capital Irish Film Festival in Washington, D.C. Over the next 3 episodes, we're going to focus on a trilogy of documentaries: Seaview, Build Something Modern, and Pyjama Girls. Seaview is a documentary made by Nicky Gogan and Paul Rowley about a former holiday camp that was turned into a direct provision centre here in Ireland.
Children are growing up, watching the parents doing nothing. We are on direct provision. It is what is being cooked that you will eat. It is what you are served that you will eat. You don't have any choice. And you can imagine if you have lived like that for 5 years. What kind of human being will you be when you eventually leave the asylum system? We are passing through a lot day in, day out. It's just that we have limited power and right. You cannot complain. You are scared to come out so that it won't affect your case. I can't even face the camera as I'm talking to you because I am scared. So that is what asylum means. I don't mind going back to Nigeria, but Gregory is not going to Nigeria until he is old enough to take care of himself, because he's the only thing I have left. So I cannot play with him. So he is my life, he is my all, he's the only thing I have. I had 4 kids, I lost 3, I have just him left. So my life revolves around him.
What happened to your other kids?
Well, they are dead. So he's the only thing I have. So, and if you have something you treasure, if you have something you cherish, you have to guard that thing jealously. At least his life. His life. He has the right to live.
So, Nicky, thank you so much for joining us here at the Museum of Everyone, and we're very excited to have you here and to have a chat. First of all, about your film Seaview, which was made with Paul Rowley in 2007, so it's 14 years ago, which is hard to believe. The film really stands up though today for a number of reasons. Obviously with regards to what's been happening in direct provision over the last number of years has been extraordinary, politically fraught, but also I think with regards to the aesthetic of the movie and you finding your feet on a visual level as well. Can you tell us a little bit, first of all, about how this film came about?
Okay, thanks for the lovely introduction, by the way, and it's just, yeah, it's such a privilege and an honour to be invited to be part of this great programme. I've been watching some of the other interviews and stuff and some of the work you put up on the museum. It's really awesome. So thanks guys for including me and Still Films work in this. So Seaview, yeah, it's just, gosh, it's quite a winding story, but like we didn't really set out to make a documentary in that way, in such a formal way, actually. We got an Arts Council grant actually to do some kind of work around asylum seekers in Ireland, and we weren't sure if it was going to be an exhibition or photography show or, you know, video art piece or you know, workshops, and that's kind of one of the things that we started off doing actually in Malsey, was going down and doing workshops with the kids and with the women's group as well. Myself and Maya used to go down to the weekly women's meeting and meet the people who live there, and as they kind of sat around and discussed their kind of concerns and what they needed from the institution that was Malsey, you know, and from the people that were working there and trying to help them and stuff. And we did like computer courses with some of the women, and myself and Dennis McNulty, our sound, our composer, did a whole radio show with a couple of the women too. And it was all kind of as well to some of them were interested in learning computer skills. Mm-hmm. And such like, so that was sort of part of it too. So that's kind of how it kind of all started. And during this whole process, we started to meet people and interview them. And initially, actually, myself and Paul talked about writing a script and setting it on a flotel, because originally, before, when the government were deciding what to do with asylum seekers that they were required to, you know, accept into the country from the EU, they were thinking about flotels, which is offshore. They have them in Holland and stuff, where people are basically warehoused offshore and these like floating asylum centres, which is obviously horrific. So we had to, yeah, I know, yeah, that was the original plan, seriously. Like, and then they decided to obviously repurpose Mosney and other B&Bs and all that kind of stuff that we know about now. But yeah, so, and it was actually the first interview we did was kind of meant to be this kind of research interview for this drama, like the script that we were going to maybe write and try and make into a film. And we both interviewed this guy. We were just like, we just looked at him, all right, okay, this has to be a documentary. Like, how dare we think that we can represent asylum seekers' lives better than, you know, than they can with using their own voices, you know. So that immediately then became a documentary after we did our first research interview. So yeah, so it's quite a process, you know, and this is what I've talked about in my bio, essentially. That's the process filmmaking, which is really, and I spoke to Paul and Maya, obviously the three of us made all these films plus a number of other people around them, you know. Absolutely, yeah, it's very much a collaboration between us all. And I spoke to him the other day about talking to you, and yeah, and Paul was saying, which is something we always said, which is like, really with Seaview, the film is made with the people in the film, you know. It's, you know, even though it's presented as a documentary about certain people's lives and their experiences, very collaborative, very much so. During the whole process, and that's why it took like 4 years really to make.
And you lived at Mosney Holiday Centre for a time as well with Paul, didn't you?
Yeah, like we did. We went, I'd say like around, I'd say the process started like between the beginning and starting the whole process I spoke about, and then ending up with the film that was shown in the IFI, was about 4 years. So over the course of time, we would go for like a week or two into Mosney. We'd stay there, you know, loads of different reasons why that worked for us and for the people in the film was we needed to get to know people so that they would trust us, you know. And even with that, you can see some of the people in the film don't even want to appear on camera, but the woman who starts the film and ends it, like I think we spoke to her for about 3 years before she gave us even a recorded interview. She was so afraid, you know, and she's so articulate and so poetic as well. She's wonderful.
I think that's something even that you're hitting on there, is this notion of access. So first of all, I suppose there's the bureaucratic and the official access. And then you're talking about really another creed of access, which is really about trust. And trust that these individuals could have in both yourself and Paul as filmmakers, and for you to become familiar with them, I suppose, through other activities.
Yeah.
With regards to kind of access now, obviously we understand that the access, there's so many restrictions with regards to what could happen or what could be filmed in direct provision.
Yeah.
So this film, one of the things that makes it so fascinating to me is this film could not really be made today because you wouldn't be given access to it, which is hugely problematic to begin with.
Yeah.
Um,
There was at the time. Now we did just to finish we did it in the end, then stayed for 6 weeks. So we stayed for quite a block of time at the end to do the final filming and stuff, just to finish that talk. But and which also, I mean, after we made it, after we finished, people who we were in the film said the reason we spoke to you and we didn't talk to anybody else who came to speak to us was because you lived with us. And that was huge, just to, because you're bang on about that. But at the time we started, those asylum seekers weren't really appearing in the media. There was some block, but they weren't allowed to talk to the press as well. So when we went in to do this process, to do workshops, we wanted to, connect with the asylum seeking community and see if there's something we could offer value, to that, to their experience. And so we were there kind of in working, doing some work with the learning centre, as it was called, through that room where the kids are dressed up in the fabric and there's computers and all the different kind of layers of stuff that goes on there, from sewing classes to computer classes and English classes and stuff, and we were there a lot over these couple of years, and it was really only kind of after a while we were there, the manager of Mosney was sort of, who are you? Why are you here filming? We were like, oh, we've been filming for ages, and up to, and honestly, like up to that point, they were like kind of fine with us to be there and film and stuff. And obviously, we had to show them, of course, the film before, and we showed it, put it out into the world because we had to get permissions. Because we went about it in such a topsy-turvy way, we didn't have the usual. We had personal release forms for everybody on camera, obviously, but we did, it kind of grew, this project sort of grew into a film, and then we realised when we got film board funding and stuff that we had to kind of cross a lot of T's, so that was a bit, because the film was originally called Mosney, but they were like, don't call it Mosney. No. Fair enough. That was the only thing they asked us to change.
I think that one of the things as well with regards to the film is this massive level of contrast from the historical use of the building, and also something that was mentioned as well in a text I think that you wrote about the film as well, was that this was built as a holiday centre in 1948, and it was a way for both Irish and English people to spend some time away from the daily grind and escape their daily lives. And to a massive extent, when it became a space for housing people who were seeking asylum, it was also a place of escape. But the context obviously is massively different. I think throughout the film you really managed, certainly with regards to how you introduced us to the holiday centre, and how the staff talk very romantically about this place and this space, and some of them have worked there for over 40 years, and that contrasting with these very these narratives of people from over 50 countries across the world that find themselves in this kind of I suppose this very new multicultural village that they have to somehow get along and find their own way. And also that notion that they feel like they're there for a short period of time. Certainly at that time, no one would have conceived that they could be there for 12 years or further. So that level of contrast between from a filmmaker's perspective, I thought was really great, because that setup where we understand that this is not purpose built for this reason, but that notion of escapism was quite important, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was, I suppose, from an artistic perspective and from the kind of the kind of fascination with the repurposing of this holiday resort, which initially was the colonials came to Ireland to this place, and then eventually Irish people were let be there, and then the asylum seekers came in different ways. And you can, in the film, it's actually kind of in a way chronological. At the start, when we were there filming, there was a lot of families from Africa, from Eastern Europe and Russia, because before European expansion had happened, and there was people from countries which are now part of the EU staying there. And then as time went on, we found a lot more people from Afghanistan and Iran and countries in that part of the world coming, and that's why the demographic of who we're meeting in the film kind of follows that change of world events. I remember after the earthquake in Pakistan, there was a huge influx of people from there that arrived, so it was anyway, that's kind of interesting sort of in terms of how the demographic changed over the course of the history of Malta and even our time there, you know.
Yeah.
Super interesting. But yeah, but it's really important, and really important to say that I suppose the people who work there thought they were doing a really good job, and they were doing the best job they could, you know, and that's why it's so important at the start for Michael, the security guard, who just was, we just saw him every day when we came in, you know, and stuff, and I'd always have to chat, so I'm like, I gotta get this guy on camera. But his talking about, you know, his line saying, you know, these are family people and their concerns are the same as ours. And that is such a beautiful line, just to ground everything that you're going to hear after that, you know.
These people are no different. Like they're family people, and their concerns are much the same as ours.
Because at the start you see Paddy and he's like welling up looking at the ballroom, which this beautiful parquet floor which has like then basketball markings on it for the community games. You're just like, how is someone allowed to do that? You know, it's like those kind of things going on as well, you know. But the people that work there and the people who were, we did interviews with loads of staff, and then we decided in the end that the voices that were wanted in the film with the asylum seekers. So we interviewed the women who worked in the kitchen, who learned how to make jollof rice, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, the women come in and men would come with recipes and stuff. Can you make us this? You know, and they sort of, you know, we represented visually in the film and stuff. We interviewed the people who worked in the HSE medical centre there, you know, it's an incredible woman, Audrey, who was a facilitator for everybody there and made everyone's life there so much better, you know. But yeah, that was sort of, I suppose we really wanted to talk about the history and set it up that way, and then, you know, really make it be about the changing demographic of the asylum centre over the course of when we made the film. So yeah,
and I think you managed to have a very there was a real duality from a directorial perspective, that you were very much in it, but there was no kind of, I felt there was no bias in it. You were in it, but you're also outside of it and able to look at kind of it holistically too, which is a difficult thing to balance, I would imagine.
It is, because you're sorry, you know, you're right. And again, I was chatting to Paul May about this, and all three films, you know, we kind of do this sort of in a way, this very much a hands-off. You can't be making a documentary because obviously it's not a whole other, but in terms of documentary form, you know, we were trying to push the format as well, and we really felt that, again, me and Paul, like, we spent like so long, like we were editing this for a couple of years before we finished it, you know, and we were cutting all along and stuff because we didn't even really know what it was going to be. But that whole trying to not enforce our prejudices and bias and opinions and political opinions, which grew over the time of making the film, you know. I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing about Kurdistan and 40 million people displaced or whatever, you know. I didn't know anything about that, you know what I mean, until I met the guys there in the barber shop, you know, started talking to us, you know. So we kind of, in a way, embraced our naivety and tried to keep it, you know, part of it, and really just let the stories or what people wanted to talk to us about kind of fill you in as a viewer, and then you can make your own.
Yeah, and I think,
you know what I mean. All three films have that going on, I think.
Yeah, no, they do, absolutely. And I think you hit on two things there as well. One of them I'd like to go back to, which was kind of the editorial process, and I suppose the aesthetic outcome of what you achieved. But I guess prior to that as well, even when I suppose you're mentioning, you know, the group of men from Kurdistan, or even, and like, again, there are people from, you know, around 50 countries, a lot of people from kind of the African continent as well. But one of the things that I thought was, I suppose, very kind of beautifully rendered throughout the documentary as well, was that there was a sense of harmony within this community, and also a real, you know, innate necessity for them all to express their own cultures, whether it was through dance, whether it was through some kind of you know, fashioning the food, or whether it was even like being, you know, somewhat entrepreneurial by, you know, I'm the guy who's going to cut everyone's hair, or, you know, finding ways to have these little cultural epicenters for themselves. And I thought that within, this kind of bubble that was Mosney, there were all of these little kind of microcosms in there of these cultures. So even, with regards to documenting those things, that must have been a lot of work as well, because you are essentially, moving from, one culture to another culture and trying to penetrate these groups and gain trust. So it's a different game, I would imagine, almost every time.
Yeah, definitely. And again, talked about the group of men, which was so sad. It's so sad to see a whole community of one gender, that there's no women at all, because when they're leaving those countries in that part of the world, like they told us, they usually would kind of have to pretend they're going to work and walk over the mountains in their going to the office shoes on their shirt and their pants, It was really sad, and that's why there's no women with them at all, the Kurds, because it's just too rough to get out, it's too hard to get out. So yeah, that was really heartbreaking, I have to say. And again, we met them very late in the day, so we would have seen them in the distance. They were always in the pool room, those guys. They didn't really talk to us and stuff like that. It was only when we met Barrows, the one Arms Barber, who was just like unbelievable. He's an activist as well. He's amazing.
Yeah.
He from hanging out with him in the barber shop, they would be coming into him, because they knew him and trusted him, and he'd great English and stuff like that, and he'd help them with their forms and applications. He's brilliant. He was like an epicenter for a lot of people, men, particularly from that kind of part of the world.
Because I started new, somebody they don't know here is a voluntary, I do voluntary. And everything I buy from myself, by my money. Especially the kids who's going to school. I cut them for them, and even girls coming also. No matter anybody, sometimes I cut it for security. Also staff for here, they coming down. I don't mind anybody. I just want to spend my time to help people, no matter for me where he's come from.
So it was through gaining his trust. We were hanging out with him a good bit, and he's brilliant, really clever. And then we got to know him a little bit. But the man that's on hunger strike that we met eventually, they just we were there, and it was one of our last days filming. I think it was actually, could have even been our last day. We were doing our crane shots and all that stuff, with all the gear. And this kids cycled up, and they were like, "Are you the film crew?" And we were like, "Yeah, we are. Yeah, we're some barbers or whatever." And they're like, "There's a man on hunger strike in the centre," and nobody knew. Like the authorities, like the management, didn't know at that point that this has been going on for like 9 days or maybe 10. There's 9 days when we met him. Mm-hmm. And all the boys and all the gang came into the room and wanted to tell their story, but they'd seen us there on, over and back for like a couple of years, I suppose. Well, it's like they were there for like 18 months, 2 years, that particular group of people. Yeah, so they'd seen us and had been watching. And then when we met them and spoke to them, they're so lovely and so warm. And then they went and they really wanted to show us their dancing, like, of course, brilliant, Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was, yeah. And I think, because they'd sort of, as I say, watched us from a distance. And then similarly with the women, because, the women obviously run the show and from African nations, in there, like running the roost there. And it's such a family centre at the start as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was mostly families, yeah. And it was definitely, again, being with them, eating with them was really important, actually. So we'd eat in the canteen, that red carpet, that kind of motif of keeping coming back to this one room and the one corridor and this kind of one place. The building as a character, buildings as characters in our films is another whole motif that we kind of always come back to. But yeah, eating with them was really important, I think, as well. And because we were loving all the African food, we were trying everything. It was amazing. It's like I even have Fiona's friend make me jollof when he comes over. You know what I mean? Like, so you got. So anyway, but yeah, that was a bit rambling. But yeah,
no, absolutely. I love it as well.
All took different approaches for sure to kind of.
Yeah, I suppose one of the things as well that was that there's the wave of what you're presenting in the documentary, and then there's also this undercurrent as well that we can all feel, and there is this I suppose very palpable fear from each of these individuals as well, who by all accounts every individual in there is aiming for the same thing. Everyone wants to gain asylum so they can stay in Ireland, so that they can become part of the fabric of society, and so they can contribute.
Of course, and there's two people say, I think Barra says it, and the woman who we don't see says it too. It's like there's no dole where these guys come from. There's no
Mm.
social welfare system, you know, for the most part, you know, and if they don't work, they don't eat. And it's so counterintuitive for people from so many parts of the world to kind of have to sit quietly and not work and not move and not be able to support themselves and their families. It's just, it's like goes against every fabric of their being, you know.
There's that level of people being afraid to say too much in case it almost affects their process or their applications for asylum. So even the amazing woman who speaks again at the beginning, at the end of the documentary, and again beautifully articulate, and such an amazing story as well. But there's that fear then that you know, anything that they say could be, you know, used against them, I suppose. So tackling that from the perspective of directing this, how did you kind of go about? Because each person had a different level of that, really, didn't it?
Yeah, it was interesting. So that woman, again, we can't obviously use her name and stuff, like she would talk to us in that way, and she's a teacher in Nigeria, you know, and she's incredibly articulate, you know, and beautiful, her turn of phrase, and we were just, oh, please, can we do an interview? If we don't turn the camera on, you know, can we do that? And she's like, okay, eventually, like, yeah, but like she disappeared, you know. She would be one of the people who just, maybe she knew she was going to run. What was happening at the time was that a lot of the women, like Vida, so the woman that at the end, she's got the kind of shorter hair and stuff, who goes back to Mosney and talks about, you know, the people being deported, and introduced the Seaview, which is where she lived in the block that was called Seaview. That she had Jason, her son, was born in Ireland, and at the time they did an amnesty which was called Leave to Remain if you'd had an Irish-born child. But the woman who we don't meet, who we don't see her face, her kid was older, he wasn't born in Ireland and stuff, so she was so she vanished. We don't know where she went. Yeah, so maybe, I think looking back, she might have known that she was going to do that at the time, and that's why she eventually decided to tell her story, you know.
Yeah.
And then other people, like there's the other guy that you don't see when he's talking under the swimming pool about the Suez Canal. He's a journalist, like Claude, like the man in the yellow shirt from Congo. Also a journalist. Met a few journalists actually. Yeah, so their fear is real, and people will be looking for them and stuff. They think, you know, and like Claude obviously was wanted to be on camera and stuff and say his piece, and he actually got asylum as well, which is brilliant.
I'll just give you some topics about Ireland, what I knew before coming to this country. So the battle for the independence, boycott, everything, Michael Collins, of course, Sinn Féin, and all those things, you know. I should say that in some ways Ireland is a little bit like an African country. The country was colonized, and not even a century ago, you had to fight for your rights. Yeah, what we have done in Africa, and we are still doing. In coming into Ireland, so I just said to myself that it was a natural destination, I should say. Coming from the Hull, I had to go to a country that had experienced the Hull, I should say. Yeah. This country is giving me safety, security, and so on. So, in return, I would like to give my modest contribution to this country. And I think that there are a lot of people who are in the same case, but they are not allowed to do it. They are seen as a threat. I don't understand that.
All of these kind of individual stories, and representing those individual stories as well, kind of in this one documentary, I think what it does is it kind of humanizes, you know, it brings us in the door, which we haven't really managed to do subsequently, you know.
Yeah.
And these individual stories show us kind of the humanity of these narratives as well. But even with regards to their, you know, their fear of kind of speaking up, or, you know, and you mentioned the journalist from the Congo there as well, that when he was talking to authorities over here, that they were very suspicious of him and told him he wasn't from the Congo just because he could speak English. So they're dealing with this very systemic racism to begin with, and these, these very thick, invisible walls, but they're in such a vulnerable position that, what can they do? And, it really does beg the question with regards to how this has evolved over the last 13 years. But yeah.
What I was shocked about that was it's such a small amount of asylum seekers make up such a small amount of non-nationals working in Ireland who have work permits who are allowed to come and work here, no problem, from loads of parts of the world, as we know. It's such a tiny amount of people, and to give them some kind of temporary work permit while they're here or whatever, just to improve their quality of life and value as a human being, would have been such a simple thing to do. I just never understood why it was never just a thing that they could have done really easily, and none of this would have been an issue anymore. There's people still living in Mosby.
Oh, no. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, again, like there's a direct provision centre opened up in my hometown of Tullamore just a year ago, and obviously throughout COVID and the pandemic, it's been extraordinarily difficult for people who are living in any of these centres. And I suppose in 2024, the government is talking about changing the system somewhat as well. So
why it's going to still take 3 more years, I've no idea. So
yeah, I know.
People, like, it's insane.
I know, and that's one of the reasons as well why even just discussing this now on the platform that we have, because I think because of COVID, nothing is really reaching the headlines apart from COVID. Of
course.
So, there are still people behind those doors in these centres. One of the things as well with regards to, I suppose, this being somewhat of a melting pot and being such a kind of multicultural community in Mosney at the time, there was, I suppose, a massive fusion where you saw all of these children playing together, and these children would have come from very kind of war-torn countries, and also some very tragic circumstances, and would have found a creed of solace and a place to have a childhood, in essence, at Mosney. How was your interaction with them over the course of this documentary?
Yeah, I mean, the kids were amazing, and they feature a lot, and they're one of the kind of connective tissues visually as well, and emotionally and stuff that we use in the film. We keep coming back to them a lot. They were amazing. I used to just joke, we had a cloud of children around us the whole time, literally, like those kids followed us everywhere, that big gang of kids, like always. They were always behind us. We were always trying to shut them up. They were brilliant and so fun. And obviously there's the spelling bee scene, which is just total panic, and the dancing scene as well, which is, funnily enough, the spelling bee was sort of constructed in a way for us to get release forms, because they were all over the footage, and we were like, how are we going to corral them? So they were only allowed to come into the spelling bee if they brought their signed release form from their parents. And then, so then we knew which kids we were allowed to show and not, so anyway, it was.
What are the words in that spelling competition as well? I mean, I thought there was, unless it was like, were those words deliberate in that?
I think it was the way Dolores wanted to have her say in the film, for sure. Like, she would not go on camera. She was Irish lady, she's in her 60s, like, mortified at the thought of going on camera, but that was her way of having her say. Yeah,
wonderful, really great.
Interesting. Yeah, she's brilliant. So the kids completely, and just were like hilarious all the time, dressing up for us and just all kinds of carry on. And I think the stark contrast of how children living in essentially a holiday resort, for like whatever amount of time, definitely has a different sort of impact on you. And to say having a childhood that maybe they wouldn't have necessarily had such a joyous and such a kind of culturally diverse as well. They wouldn't have probably come across that from where they're from. And even at the end of the Boys the Revolution crew interview, when they're talking about leaving Mosby, they're talking about hanging out, in the pool room and having a crack with all the teenagers and stuff like that, they had a very different experience in Mosby than their parents did, obviously. Or not obviously, sorry, that's what we discovered, I should say. No, definitely.
I think one of the things as well that maybe we hadn't touched on, but for me, certainly it was a bit of a trip down memory lane, having gone to Mosney Holiday Centre with the community games when I was a kid, wearing an awfully tracksuit, having kind of won an art competition or something. But I saw this parade of the community games and all of these Irish children coming in, and I just kind of thought to myself, in contrast, there was this kind of level of privilege that was contextualized for me in those few short scenes, and the idea that the community games actually still went ahead while this place was, a refuge for individuals seeking asylum from all over.
Yeah, I mean the juxtaposition of the community games, which is, there isn't anything more nationalistic or expresses our nationalism more than the community games possibly at all. I never made it. I never made it to the finals. Anyway, but I mean, just as an image, and I mean, when we heard they still held the community games, we were like pretty gobsmacked, because it's a bit like in your face, I mean, but then the residents were like, oh, we quite enjoy it, it's a bit of fun, and they didn't feel that it was an imposition or whatever like that at all. Like we were very sensitive about it. We were going, oh, how dare they, you know what I mean? Because of that, like, how could you literally wave Irish nationalism and branded Irish counties in the faces of people who are trying to become naturalized into the country? So in terms of the visual aspects of the film and coming across things and making documentaries, these things tend to happen, where we went down in August. That's when we were there for the long period of time. We were there for around 6 weeks. It was during August, and the community games are held there as well. Yeah, so I mean, obviously that helped us really, describe, Irishness and all those kind of things that I haven't to kind of say a word, like it all kind of just is very present there in those kind of sequences and stuff.
That kind of bizarreness of reality, I suppose, when you're making a documentary, and these kind of very kind of polar situations, but being able to see them, I suppose, positioned so kind of tightly together, does really contextualize these kind of narratives that we're learning all the way through this documentary. Yeah.
I live in Lusk. Moved there 4 years ago. I used to live in Swords before. Then they moved to me and my uncle to Mosley. It's a refugee camp. The one moved over here, I was like, okay, I didn't have no friends, like I couldn't speak the language, anything. I was like, how will I do this? Like, when you live in Mosley, you don't know where you stay, here you go. I have many friends, like, we're in school in the morning, and the next day, like, he's home in South Africa or he's home in Congo somewhere, like. I met the guys, like Solomon, all of them, like, guys, can you rap and stuff, like, I was like, oh yeah, we can try, Most of them from Nigeria, and there is like an English country, and they do hip hop, like most of them do, like, they know about hip hop or like kind of different type of music. Then we just mess around, like, then I had an idea, like, guy, we should make this series, we should try and do a concert, like, just for mostly people and, our friends in school or people we know, like.
Check it out. Fake wanna be, my rhymes are quality. I heard you get your rhymes from people to make it happen.
The other thing I just wanted to talk to you about as well is your stylistic approach, and like finding that balance and that aesthetic between us developing a very intimate relationship with the center itself, from scenes of rooms where there are masses of quilts, and then where we see that the swimming pool is empty with these voiceovers until the community games suddenly is on a Mosley, and then the swimming pool is full, and then even the releasing of those balloons, and these kind of narratives and visuals within the film, all of these ingredients really make for this documentary and give it a pace and a rhythm that I think is just wonderful. Can you tell me a little bit about the visual aspect and how you managed to put that together with Paul?
Paul, when Paul and I are making films together, we tend to, he shoots them. He shoots. I'm not very good in that camera, which is fine. Paul's incredible. So like that, the balloons, I'm glad you brought it up because I watched the film again last night. Just like that, like meeting the boys who'd left Mosley, the lads, Revolution crew, who are I'm friends with one of them still, Solomon, which is gas. But them talking about leaving and stuff, and then going to the balloons firstly sheltering under the balloons, like what a terrible umbrella. You know, what a very unusual decision, which is kind of hilarious. So that's really funny. And then the balloons, and it's just a freedom celebration and lift off, and then there's a one balloon that's kind of trying to get back to the crowd of balloons, and then we go to Tiki, who's the boy that's left behind. Who they go to see in the shop when they're walking through, and they go, "Oh, we're going to visit Tiki," but we never show him on camera until we see him then. So these are always very deliberate decisions, you know.
Yeah, of course.
This is why it took, you know, really long time to edit the film, because they're like crafting all this, like hopefully we should work on a maybe somewhat conscious but also subconscious level, you know, this kind of, and then obviously Dennis's soundtrack. It's just amazing.
Yeah,
having it all weave together, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, there's definitely stuff, you know. There's obviously a lot of stuff that's analogous, and there's motifs as well. Obviously, the chairs, coming back to the chairs until the final shot with the chairs locking the escape exit, and then imagine we come back. We have a canteen with chairs as well. You know, there's a little pin lines been drawn between, you know, the two films particularly. But yeah, so I suppose it's like shooting everything digital, our first digital camera, brilliant, you know, roll on everything. We had so much footage, you know, and just picking up all those little things like the Superman toy on the ground and stuff, you know, and, you know, the curtains, and again, like the parquet floor, you know, and all these little sort of nostalgic things. And then, I suppose, and then just having this wealth of visual material to work with, but then things happening like the kids spilling milk on the floor, you know, in the canteen, you know, and then the woman stomping it with the tissue, just all these familiar moments, you know. And I think what it is spending a lot of time somewhere, you get to do that, you know, and it's unusual. Like, so there's another film I made with Niall McCann called Lost in France, and we also spent about 4 years making that. We were over in Glasgow, always there, filming all the time, you know what I mean? And, you know, and you don't often have the luxury to do that, you know, when you're making documentaries. But I think spending time there as well, you just catch those little sort of verite moments as well. And certainly Pajama Girls too, you know. And I think part of it, and then weaving it together and trying to make those subtle visual connections with what you're hearing about or what you've just heard or are about to hear, you know, like the balloon being a very kind of obvious one, you know, the kind of green balloon sort of on the edge of the balloons, trying to get back to the bunch of balloons. That's how I see it anyway.
No, you know? Absolutely, I think you're right as well. It's within those little moments as well that gives us a little bit of, as viewers, gives us a little bit of time to really consider what these narratives are and to contextualize them sometimes. And I think that that's one of the beautiful things about both this film's about both this film and Build Something Modern, which we'll be talking about a little bit later as well, and Pajama Girls indeed as well, because there is that kind of very much that visual thread and this kind of pace.
They're connected, definitely, but the pace and those moments of thinking, and that's why the film is now whatever 24 minutes long or whatever, you know, because we really wanted these pauses, you know, we really did. And that's, you know, some people think it's too long and a little bit boring, but that's okay, you know. But it's meant to be thought-provoking. That's what we're trying to do, you know. And we're not, as I said, we're meant to thought-provoking without being pushing things down people's throats, you know.
Yeah, and I think that as well, it's important that because of the thread and because of the, I suppose, the political nature of what this documentary is, that it does have this other energy and this other thread that has, you know, been very much thought about and very much considered. And again, it's always, I feel like when I'm looking at a documentary that you're involved in, that there's this level of intimacy, that it's giving us permission as viewers to kind of enter a space, not only a physical space, but an alternative way of thinking about something. And again, this kind of blind spot.
Yeah, sorry, that's really good to hear you say that, because that's really what we're trying to do. And there's definitely sequences like, again, with the guy who's on hunger strike, you know, this kind of way of bringing you in out of his world, like the last two shots, so because I only watched it last night, you know, and we see him then lying in the bed, and then we see his shoes at the door, so we're kind of leaving his room, his dwelling.
Never eating, he's still waiting for an answer of the justice or solicitor. What he cannot do. He said, I promise myself I'm not eating even I'm dead in here in the bed. Yeah. why he don't want to eat it. I mean, to show that the government he really have a problem. He cannot do something shouting. He wanted to do something by him body, to show the government by him body, to make him hungry, to show the people who have a good heart. My life is a danger. He do that for that matter.
He says he will go until the end, until he gets a positive answer from government. His brother, they poisoned him. Yeah, after he left Afghanistan, they poisoned him and killed him. He has a letter to send the Justice Department. Dear Minister, I have been waiting for a year to know from your officials about my appeal to remain in Ireland on humanitarian grounds. This waiting has caused me intolerable stress and worries. Please get me some to examine my call as a matter for extreme urgency and give me an answer. Yours sincerely, Abdullah.
Also, I know we've referred to this this woman a number of times as well, the Nigerian woman. You start the documentary with her in a voiceover, and also you finish the documentary with her voice too. And obviously there's a wonderful kind of pictorial offering along with that voiceover. But she's really talking about, certainly in towards the end, about the systemic racism that she has experienced while she was here in Ireland. And to quote her, she says, "I didn't bring myself into the world. I came out in Nigeria." When I was in Nigeria, Irish priests brought Christianity to Nigeria. We welcomed them to our country like they were white-skinned gods, like they were next to God, like they were next to Jesus. And then she goes on to discuss about, how she was treated since she got here. So when we're looking at, Build Something Modern, which is another film we will be discussing a little bit later, we're still looking at a very kind of post-colonial and this kind of post-colonial shadow, and this kind of very kind of misplaced idea of what people kind of the perception of where people might the perception that people might have of a place, a space, or a space versus the reality of that.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why. Yeah, I mean, just talk about what she's talking about there. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that is something that Claude even touches on too. From a political perspective, from the history of Ireland and stuff, and history of African nations and how similar they were, and that's why he decided to come here. But her saying, "I didn't decide, to be born in Nigeria. I just came out there." It's one of my favorite things that's said in it altogether in any of the films we've ever made. Because none of us have a choice about these things, and it just makes it so human. Everybody has the same experience. Everybody's born, somewhere. You know what I mean? And nobody escapes that, and everybody dies at the end of the day, and everything that happens between all. I mean, it just makes it so human. Like, just, I suppose, in a way, why be, cruel and unnecessarily, racist and bigoted, it just doesn't make any sense to her, you know what I mean? And especially because then, as I said, because her experience was, the priests were, as I say, welcomed with open arms. And then we see this in Build Something Modern when we start looking at the priests at the start of the film are back to kind of back in Kiltegan to die, back there to retire. They're in their 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. They spent their whole life since they were 18 in African nations. And even in my uncle's interview, he goes, "We were the Kikuyu. That was our tribe. We are, I think he says, yeah, and that's so interesting, and that's why the two films for us, and to an extent Pajama Girls as well, are linked, but particularly those two. It's almost like when we decided to make Build Something Modern and we started looking into it again, total naive, didn't have a clue about any of this. It was a hidden history anyway. And the way the two films almost are the converse of each other in a weird way, but they're connected together through this woman's monologues, you know, and what she talks about.
I don't know how to paint the picture to you. To see myself as a Nigerian, I didn't bring myself into the world. I came out and found myself in Nigeria. From the part of the country I come from the East. The people that brought Christianity, the Irish priests, you know, it's so embarrassing. It's like you are coming home. These are the people you see as gods. You know, we see Reverend Fathers, especially when they are white-skinned. Anything they say, you know, is final. And when you now come into a country and they start treating you bad, these are the people, when they come, we worship them, we love them, we pamper them. We think that these are people that after God, you count them next. Yes, oh yes. But when you come here, they label you a devil. They call you names, they call you liars, that we are thieves, we are criminals, we come here to steal Irish money. For Christ's sake, they should realize that the life and destiny of people are in their hands. You know what it means for you to leave everything you have as a human being, for you to leave your family, to leave your childhood, memories, everything, and you came to a country where you are a total stranger. I mean, you cannot just, it's not something you just wake up and decide to do.
You know, there's so many kind of connections with regards to these narratives, and again, it's that the blind spot sometimes that history has, and you kind of manage to unearth that. Sometimes it's contemporaneous, and then sometimes it's historical. And I think with regards to how these you know, spark off each other as documentary narratives is, you know, you have, you know, these white priests and architects leaving, you know, to go to an African country, like, you know, just kind of post-independence at the beginning or at the beginning of the 60s, and you know, and how their experience there and how they were received versus, you know, you have you know, people from the African continent coming to Ireland and their experience. And you know, I mean, it really is about, at the end of the day, these are individual, these are narratives, and yeah, like you said, we're born and we die. What happens in between, it should be just our being able to extend our kindness or our
exactly, or exactly, yeah, or enthusiasm, or what you're doing, you know, your enthusiasm for kind of sharing knowledge and information and culture, you know what I mean? That you can definitely, I mean, it's a privilege obviously to be able to do these things, you know, but it's funny when you're talking, I'm thinking of another kind of a third part to that, which is in the seminaries now, you know, there's no young Irishmen become priests, like tiny men. They're usually people who are coming from black families from who they were either, you know, first generation or migrated here, or South America now, who are in the seminaries. You know, if there's any young people at all, you know, for the most part, they seem to be kind of like retirement homes, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of an interesting twist in the whole using of this, you know. Yeah. Documentary and that, if I want to make another one about priests.
Well, believe me, you will make another one. But what I'm going to leave it at that. Nicky, thank you so much for joining us for this episode at the Museum of Everyone.
I have episodes. Amazing.
I have episodes at the Museum of Everyone, and in our next episode, we will be elaborating and talking more about Build Something Modern. Which is I suppose the second documentary in a trilogy, which includes Seaview, Build Something Modern, and Pajama Girls. So Nicky, Gogan, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks. And we look forward to speaking to you very, very soon.
Thanks, Brendan. It's a great conversation.